The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, hello, everyone, and good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on when or where you're dialing in from. And we would love to welcome you to our webinar today, which is how to avoid the 7 top mistakes made when managing Citrix performance. It is right now at 10 o'clock Central Time in the United States. And I wanted to, while we're still waiting for everybody to kind of get on the call, give everybody a couple minutes. And while we do that, I'm going to launch a poll to get everybody's feedback here while we wait a few minutes. And that quick poll is, what are some of the biggest performance management challenges that you're facing today in your Citrix infrastructure? Please select all that apply out of this list. And some of those are you not able to measure the user experience effectively? Is Citrix being blamed for everything? Is diagnosis too slow and complex? Do you lack a single dashboard for Citrix tiers? Or do you experience a lack of end-to-end performance views? Or is there a combination of these things? If you could respond to this poll, that'd be great. All right then, thank you very much. Almost 80% of you all participated in that poll, so we greatly appreciate that. And now let's get back to the actual webinar now that it's about 5 minutes after the hour. Again, welcome everybody to our webinar today, how to avoid the top 7 mistakes made when managing Citrix performance. I am your moderator, and my name is Christine Ackley. I am the Director of Marketing Operations here at EG Innovations, and I will just be kind of guiding this discussion today. Now with that, let's get into just a few logistics here, which is please submit your questions at any time during the webinar using the questions panel on the GoToWebinar client. We have an expert on the call that will be answering those live. So anytime you have a question, please feel free to enter those questions. We will be answering them as they come in. And then of course we will have a Q&A at the end as well. This webinar is being recorded. You will receive a link to the recording in a few days. We hope by Friday you will actually get the slides as well as the actual recording to the event. And then the copy of the actual slides is already posted to SlideShare at slideshare.net/EGinnovation. So they are available for download now or as soon as this webinar is over. And before we actually get into our speakers today, our presenters today, and the agenda that we're going to get into today, let's actually share the results of the poll that we just did. And so the question was, what are some of the biggest performance management challenges in your Citrix infrastructure? And we have, actually quite a lot of you have quite a few of these challenges. Number one being not able to measure the user experience at 70%. So that is quite a lot of you that have that particular challenge. Coming in second is a lack of end-to-end performance view, so that you can see end-to-end what's actually happening in your environment. That's at 61%. Then next at 52% is Citrix being blamed for everything because not knowing kind of what the underlying cause is of what might be causing any kind of slowness. And then following that up at 38% and 44% respectively is lack of a single dashboard for Citrix tiers, and then diagnosis is too slow or complex. So very interesting results, and again, we appreciate you all participating in that poll. And let's get back to the webinar while we take a look at today's presenters. We've got two awesome presenters today with us, and that would be Raymond Altero, and here he is with Anexanet, and he is the manager of infrastructure delivery and end user computing. And a little bit about Ray is that he is a highly accomplished information technology leader and professional with more than 18 years of experience and a proven track record in leading and managing the design, sales strategy, service offerings, development, pre-sales, and implementation initiatives of major end user computing projects across diverse organizations. He is an expert in the areas of consulting, cloud architecture, IT infrastructure, and contingency planning. The biggest Citrix environment and architecture he has designed recently was for up to 115,000 total users geographically distributed across the United States. Virtualization, end user experience, and cloud have been the biggest focus for Ray over the last several years. In addition to Ray, we also welcome Srinivas Ramanathan. He is the CEO of EG Innovations and also the founder of EG Innovations, and he has been associated with designing and implementing EG Innovations performance monitoring solutions all the way from when Citrix MetaFrame XP was the only product from Citrix. Got 15 plus years of experience with Citrix performance management. We are excited to have these two experts with us today to share their thoughts on how to avoid the top 7 mistakes made when managing Citrix performance. With that, let's briefly go over the agenda for today's webinar. And that would be Citrix. Let's look at some use cases and the need for performance management. Why is performance management so critical with Citrix today? And then we'll take a look at those top 7 mistakes in the title that are made when managing Citrix performance and how to avoid them so they don't happen to you. And then we will follow that up with a solution tour of EG Enterprise for Citrix XenApp and Citrix Desktop and how our solution can actually help you avoid those 7 mistakes. And then we'll, of course, follow that up with a Q&A at the end of the webinar. And with that, I would like to invite both Ray and Srinivas to give just a few informational facts about each of their respective companies. Ray, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and I hope everybody's hearing me okay, and I hope everybody's off to a good start today. And thank you for the wonderful introduction as well. I don't want to go into too much detail for these next couple of slides, but I want to really get into what Anexanet's all about. We just want to get into some quick, fast facts is what I call it. So again, where I came from prior to Anexanet, I actually worked at Citrix Systems and worked there for a little bit of time working in the architecture team and Citrix Consulting. So bringing all of that knowledge to Anexanet and helping build out a viable and user computing practice was what I was all about. But we're much more than that. We have an award-winning technology firm that's founded since 2000. We're emerging mid-market enterprises, work with a lot of the Fortune 1000 clients. We're at about $110 million in product revenue for last year, but we're growing substantially, 250 plus employees, and we're privately held and privately funded. Again, the biggest key here is that we are 6 years consecutive running as the best place to work. One of the reasons why I came on board here, and one of the reasons why we've been so successful. Next slide. So some of our solution portfolio, again, this falls into 3 key areas and what we call our client service model. 3 solution areas, all led by VPs of delivery. We have application solutions. So again, we are the only location in the tri-state area that actually has stood up our own application development team that works on a variety of different mobile applications, digital formatted applications, you name it. Business intelligence solutions, BI and big data are big topics out there, and where I fall under is infrastructure solutions, which is highly available converged infrastructure and mission-critical applications, EUC being one of those practices where we actually focus on anything that touches the end user. So where your end user experience is important to me. Our infrastructure piece is highlighted here, as you can see. EUC mobility is in the top 4, and that's where I reside. VDI is a big topic today, and we're going to be covering some of those details in our slides with Srinivas. And profile persona management, BYOD, mobile device management, and et cetera. Some of our EUC solutions I wanted to highlight here. Again, we're a specialist in Citrix. We're also a Citrix service provider, and also dive into some of the other partnerships with VMware and Microsoft. So the diagram to the right pretty much illustrates any device, any location. When you think of EUC, that's pretty much what we talk about there, is getting everything to any endpoint at any time. Next slide.
Hi everyone, Srinivas with EG Innovations. Quick introduction to who we are. EG Innovations is a leading provider of performance monitoring, diagnosis, and reporting software for applications and infrastructure support. Over the years, we've specialized in monitoring and diagnosing performance challenges that desktop and application virtualization introduce in particular. We've been a Citrix technology partner since 2003, and we have extensive experience working with large Citrix installations. In fact, just yesterday, we announced that Citrix themselves are going to be using our EG Enterprise solution for monitoring the infrastructure that they've set up at the upcoming Citrix Synergy 2016 conference next week to support their keynotes, demos, labs, and so on. So we are very excited about this, and in the next 50 minutes or so, we'll get into how EG Innovation Solutions can help you with Citrix performance management. Back to you, Christine.
All right, well, everyone, thank you so much for your introductions of your company, and now we are kind of ready to dig into the content today. So let's move forward with that, and Ray, please take it from here.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. So, talking about the Citrix technologies and use cases, the usage of Citrix technology has grown pretty tremendously over the years. Over 300,000 organizations worldwide use these technologies across various verticals and organizations. I mean, it's getting pretty up there. There are many use cases, including bring your own device initiatives. We have PC refresh initiatives, flex work, mobile workspaces, remote partner access, and so forth and so on. There are usually common reasons for why organizations adopt these technologies. Higher security, centralized management, and cost reductions that come from this, mobility, simplified migrations are some of just the common reasons for adopting Citrix in the workplace. Centralized management and image management is also key for this as well.
Ray, many of these cases are actually business critical. So at EG Innovations, we recently published the 2016 performance survey of Citrix professionals. You'll see a link to this survey at the bottom of that graphic. We had asked our respondents how critical their Citrix services were to the business. 96% of our respondents indicated that Citrix services were business critical. That is, if Citrix services were to slow down or become unavailable, then business would be affected.
Srinivas, I'd even add to that and say that performance is more important in a Citrix infrastructure than it used to be when we had physical PCs and applications. I mean, if a user's PC had an issue, for instance, it affects just one user. So when you consider a Citrix infrastructure where there's a problem with that core service, say PVS or provisioning servers, that'll definitely slow down all accesses to the desktop and applications. So, I got to say performance of the Citrix infrastructure is extremely important in that case.
So recently, there's been a lot of research and interest in the application performance area. Most of these discussions, though, have been around web applications. So an interesting question to consider is how performance sensitive are Citrix applications when you compare them with web applications. The table here compares the performance requirements of web applications and Citrix apps. Although both web and Citrix applications are interactive, their level and type of interactivity is very different. With web applications, when you access a page, you issue a request, you wait for a response. If you've got a form-based application, you fill out the form fill happens on the client, the information is transmitted to the server, and the processing of the data happens on the server. In the case of Citrix applications, the form fill, even keystrokes, screen movements, everything is handled on the server. The client actually sends all the data to the server, it's processed and then responded back. So response time requirements for Citrix are more stringent than they are for web applications. Typical latencies for Citrix are around 150 milliseconds at most, whereas for web applications, the industry standard limit is around 4 seconds. Both web applications and Citrix applications use the concept of sessions, but they use it for different purposes. A session in the web application context is used to remember who you are, what you're doing. On the other hand, in a Citrix application, a session is what is used to keep the communication going. So although both web and Citrix applications are connection-oriented, the way they handle connections and their robustness to connection drops is very different. A Citrix session is based on a persistent TCP connection. Hence, if you have a short network interruption, that can cause your TCP connection to drop. The session will get disconnected. On the other hand, web applications can use multiple connections in parallel. The context is stored locally on the client, and therefore, they're far more resistant to intermittent connection problems than Citrix applications are. So the point I'm driving towards from the previous comparison is that Citrix-based services are some of the most performance-sensitive services being deployed in the enterprise. Again, drawing from the 2016 performance survey we just did, you can see that close to half of the respondents, 48% of respondents, see Citrix as the most performance-sensitive application in the enterprise. And another 45% consider it almost as performance-sensitive as the other critical services that they support.
Thank you, Srinivas. And you know, when I talk about performance monitoring to all of my clients, I often have people who think of performance monitoring as like a tracking server or network resources and something like that. That's how performance monitoring was done in the past, though. Today, it's not sufficient to say that my server CPU was low or that my network is not utilized. You know, being a Citrix admin, you're measured by the experience that the users see. If your users are happy and productive, then you're doing a good job. Of course, everybody knows that, even on the back end. If they are not satisfied with their experience accessing Citrix-based services, then you're not doing a good job. So it doesn't matter what's under the hood. By the way, that's not true for Citrix. This is the case for any application being used in the enterprise, not just Citrix.
So you're absolutely right, Ray. There have been many instances in the past where even industry experts have been confused about what sort of monitoring solution is needed for a Citrix infrastructure. So I've pulled out a couple of cases here. Rachel Berry was a product manager at Citrix not too long ago. She posted on a blog last year that there were over 100 plus monitoring solutions for Citrix infrastructures. Brian Madden and Kevin Goodman had used the term YAM, yet another monitor, to refer to a monitoring tool. The indication here being that there were far too many choices for Citrix customers. In reality, a majority of these tools are generic Windows and server monitoring tools that focus on resources, not so much on the user experience and not so much on visibility into the Citrix stack.
In light of what you just said, Srinivas, it makes sense to define in the course of this discussion what are some of those key criteria for any monitoring solution you choose for a Citrix infrastructure. In my mind, personally, user experience is key, and that's what EUC is all about. Citrix user experience itself can mean many things. On this slide, you'll see some of what I consider a key for Citrix user experience. Citrix logons are a very important step, especially when people are coming into the environment. Usually that is where a lot of issues occur right off the bat. And in some domains, like healthcare, a user may have a login to Citrix several times a day from different devices, doesn't matter which one. Once you log in, you have a launch to your application, and the application launch has to be quick no matter what, especially in the healthcare realm. Once you launch the application, keystrokes and screen refreshes should be super fast. The session must remain connected, and if your session gets disconnected in the middle, which does happen, you can lose your work, and repeated disconnects will lead to a lot of frustration. Anybody in the back-end IT department will know what I'm talking about. Then printing has to work well, and multimedia playback has to be smooth, and audio video applications need to be fluid as well. These are just some key aspects of Citrix user experience. From a monitoring standpoint, a monitoring solution for Citrix must be able to measure the user experience well, and if the user experience is not acceptable, it must help the administrator quickly determine what they need to do to resolve that issue. Based on this discussion that we're having, our first Citrix monitoring tip I would call is looking for performance monitoring tools with Citrix expertise, not just the ones that report CPU, memory, disk usage, network utilization, and all of that. When performance issues actually start occurring, you will need the Citrix-specific visibility these tools provide.
So we spoke about Citrix user experience and how important it is. Now, one of the things I want to highlight is that Citrix is the front end to a variety of applications. When a user logs in, they see the Citrix screen splash up. They know they're accessing an app or a desktop via Citrix. When a problem happens, the user complaint often points to Citrix as the cause of the problem. So complaints such as my desktop is not accessible, my applications are slow to launch, are extremely common in the Citrix world.
That's absolutely true, Srinivas. I couldn't agree with you more. When the help desk hears these complaints that Citrix is slow and it's not working and everything has to be deemed a Citrix issue, they invariably blame the Citrix admin or the engineer or whoever's on top of it. Your job as a Citrix admin or a Citrix champion in that organization is to fix that problem if it is in the Citrix tier, no matter what the back-end issue is.
Ray, very often we hear that the problem is not in the Citrix stack. It could be anywhere in the infrastructure that supports Citrix. So again, the graphic here is shown from it's taken from our 2016 Citrix Performance Survey. And this is what respondents told us. Problems can be in the network connection from the user terminals, with the infrastructure services like Active Directory, with storage, virtualization platform. All of these can impact Citrix performance.
And yet in all these cases, the user is probably just telling the help desk that Citrix is slow. I've seen that in at least 80% of the service desk tickets that we had to analyze in a lot of different projects that we've done throughout the years. So your job as a Citrix admin doesn't end with saying that the Citrix tiers are fine and just peachy. You have to prove where the problem lies and get them fixed, because you're responsible ultimately, not just for the Citrix tier, but for the entire Citrix service. As you could see from this graphic up here, today's Citrix infrastructure is fairly complex. You have many tiers of hardware and software to support the service. Even if you just look at the Citrix tiers, there are other pieces: NetScalers, storefronts, licensing servers, provisioning servers, delivery controllers, and I could just name other things as well that are part of that. Users may even be accessing from their mobile devices, connecting through Zen Mobile. That's also another addition to the stack. All of these Citrix tiers may be virtualized. Well, more often than not, VMware ESX or Hyper-V are used as a virtualization platform, not Zen Server. You know, that 99% of what I see out there is on top of a VMware hypervisor. Then you have storage from another vendor. Then you have network connectivity to the end devices. A slowdown in any of these tiers affects the Citrix user experience. There's multiple facets to this. How to figure it out is the tricky part. To troubleshoot slowness, you need to know which tiers are working and which ones aren't. So you need visibility into the performance of Citrix tiers and also the non-Citrix tiers: virtualization, storage, networking, just to name a few. That's the service that it depends on. Furthermore, these tiers are all interdependent, as you can see from the arrows on the graphics that we're blinking here. So a problem in one tier can ripple and affect all the other tiers. It's a domino effect. That's the case in a lot of things we do in life. For example, a profile server slowness can manifest as a slow Citrix login. There's different components to this that can then have a play in it. More often than not, I see that because of the SQL database adds size too quickly and you have to truncate the logs. There's a lot of components that need to be taken into consideration.
So this brings us to our second Citrix monitoring tip. Users will invariably complain that Citrix is slow. You need to understand that they're not talking about a specific Citrix server or tier. They're complaining about the performance of the entire service end-to-end. A service slowdown can be caused by any of the tiers of the infrastructure. Therefore, when framing your Citrix monitoring strategy, look for solutions that can provide you end-to-end visibility across the Citrix and the non-Citrix tiers of your infrastructure. Let's now turn our attention to the monitoring tools that Citrix provides to help administrators manage their infrastructure. For several years, Citrix EdSite was a popular choice. Even though it didn't have complete end-to-end visibility, it still helped you, the Citrix administrator, get insights into key aspects of Citrix performance. You could monitor user logon times, see latencies that users were seeing, and also see who's getting disconnected. Now, starting with Citrix XenApp and XenDesktop version 7, Citrix has moved to a new product architecture and discontinued EdSite, at least in its earlier form. What you now have is not one integrated console, but multiple different tools from Citrix to give you visibility into your infrastructure. There is Citrix Director, which is free. Then there is Citrix NetScaler Insight that is available as part of NetScaler's Platinum licensing. And then you have multiple different consoles for Xen Server, Xen Mobile, Xen Desktop, ShareFile, and so on.
Let's talk about Citrix Director first, because that's, of course, one of the key components to monitoring Citrix Studio, as it's called these days, or Xen Desktop Studio, however you want to still call it. This is the Citrix admin's best friend today, and many of you may be familiar with it. It has changed over the last several years since I've been working on it, I must say. Using a web browser, you can connect to Director and see how well logins are working, who's connecting to the Citrix farm, and which server. You could actually drill down into the Citrix session and see what processes are running and what latencies users are seeing. And best of all, it's free and therefore available in every Citrix installation. The way I see it is Director is a useful tool for troubleshooting. You can see if there are failed connections and if a logon is slow. There's also one thing I wanted to mention. If you were to go directly into the Citrix logon process and drill in, you could actually see the parsing of the logins and how many seconds each login takes into each portion. If a specific user is complaining, for instance, it gives you access to the key metrics about the user session and the applications the user's running. The drawback with Director is that it's a help desk tool. I mean, that's what it is. That's what it's built for. To get details of a user session after the user complains, it is useful, very useful in that regard. But it does not proactively alert you to the issues, and the metrics it collects are limited. Furthermore, it does not have the visibility into many of the infrastructure tiers, so Citrix is just the main component for it that it can actually monitor. Director is focused on the XenApp session and the Xen Desktop session, so it doesn't really provide much information about the actual hypervisor, even if it's Xen Server, for instance, Storefront, NetScaler, and the other non-tier Citrix tiers. The other built-in monitoring tool is Citrix NetScaler Insight. This tool uses what we call AppFlow data, and it's collected by the NetScaler device to provide information about application, desktop activity, and performance. Since the NetScalers are handling all of the Citrix sessions coming in and doing all the offloading and the load balancing, they can track the latencies that Citrix users are actively seeing. So user experience and activity monitoring is NetScaler Insight's key value. From the data it collects, you can actually see the HDX, or what Citrix coins HDX, high definition experience latencies, seen by each Citrix user. You can also see how this latency is broken down into WAN latency and data center latency internal to the network. This way, when a user complains that the Citrix is slow in general, you can determine if the issue is due to the network or not. And if it is the network, in fact, it is your local network or due to the WAN that the user is connecting from. And one caveat I wanted to add is, NetScaler Insight isn't free completely. You need NetScaler Platinum licensing for this. Now, as we all know, in the Citrix world, NetScaler has two different licensing platforms: platform licensing and universal licensing for remote access. So the Platinum licensing I'm talking about is the platform licensing. NetScaler Insight is a great tool for a Citrix admin. However, you can't just use it as the monitoring tool because it just gives you the network-centric view. If the problem is in the network, NetScaler Insight will tell you exactly where the issue is. If the slowdown is due, however, to the virtual platform piece of it, or because of the application, or due to an issue in the Zen app server itself, NetScaler Insight will not be able to diagnose that particular issue.
So in summary, Ray, Citrix Director and NetScaler Insight are good solutions that serve different purposes. However, neither of these is a complete end-to-end performance monitoring tool. To get total performance visibility, you're going to have to put together a plethora of tools, one for XenApp, one for NetScaler, another one for your virtual infrastructure, yet another one for your storage, another for your applications, and so on. So this brings us to our third Citrix performance monitoring tip. The built-in monitoring tools with Citrix, while useful, are not sufficient for you to manage the performance of your Citrix services end-to-end. With that background, let's turn our attention next to monitoring virtual desktops that may be deployed using Citrix XenDesktop. We see a lot of enterprises looking at VDI as just another virtual infrastructure. After all, your virtual desktops are just VMs. So if I had ESX servers hosting virtual desktops, can't I just use my vCenter, which is my virtual server monitoring tool, and monitor my virtual desktops as well? The answer to this question is no. Virtual server management and virtual desktop management are very different. And there are three reasons why I say this is the case. A VDI infrastructure is more than just a collection of ESX servers with virtual machines. In the VMware context, vCenter does not have visibility into your delivery controller, profile server, provisioning server, storefront, etc. This is a big limitation. Secondly, your vCenter just looks at your virtual machines. It does not look at who is logged into the virtual machine, which users are logged in. With VDI, very often, the workload of a virtual machine is very dependent on who's logged in. A programmer logging in is going to be using a different set of applications than a finance person logged into a desktop. Hence, understanding the workload, understanding the user logged in is very important because the workload is user dependent. The third reason why I say virtual server management, virtual desktop management are different is because a lot of the issues that happen in VDI are actually happen within the desktop. Monitoring tools that look at your desktop as a black box can't really help solve a majority of issues. If you had a runaway application running inside your virtual desktop, if the user was accessing an application that he or she shouldn't be accessing and causing a lot of IOPS or causing a lot of CPU usage, you wouldn't know about this by just looking at the desktop from a virtual center view. So our fourth Citrix performance monitoring tip is don't just expect to use your virtual server monitoring tools to monitor your virtual desktops. With this quick background, I'm going to take a quick tour of the EG Enterprise solution and show you how it can help with these four Citrix performance monitoring needs. I'm just going to use my browser. So I've logged into the EG Enterprise solution. I've logged in as a user called Jim. EG Enterprise is 100% web-based, so all you need to do is use your browser, connect to the console. You get your own user login, so if you're a Citrix service provider, you can actually provide logins for your individual customers. Each of them can log in and look at the health of their infrastructure. The color codes we use in the product are fairly standard. Green means things are working well. Different shades of red indicate different levels of problems. As we discussed earlier, it's important when you monitor your Citrix infrastructure that you look at it from a service perspective, not a server perspective. So I've clicked on the Services tab on the Infrastructure Health panel. You can see that user Jim is managing a couple of business services. One of them is working well. The other one, PQN Trading, which is a virtual desktop service delivered over Citrix and VMware, is not doing so well. Let me find out why this service is having a problem. The first thing you want to know about a service is what is the user experience like. User experience can be monitored in a couple of different ways. You can monitor the infrastructure passively and collect performance insights from the applications that are supporting the service, like the delivery controller. Alternatively, you can simulate a user logging into Citrix, accessing the desktop, performing some activity, and then logging out. From the results of the simulation, you can figure out what is the performance being delivered to a typical user. In this case, we're looking at the user experience for the PQN trading site, which is the metrics here are being collected by emulating a user connecting to your Citrix environment. You can see the different transactions that are being simulated. 100% availability means the transaction succeeded. The response time tells you how well each transaction is working. What you can see from the screen is it's taking more than 12 seconds to access the user desktop. At this point, you should expect that your users are probably complaining that the virtual desktop access is slow. Now, knowing that you have a problem is good, but where is the real issue? Is it in the network? Could it be the virtual platform? Could it be in the virtual desktop? Or could it be storage? To answer this question, I'm going to click on the transaction that was having an issue. The next level drill down takes me deeper into the service. It shows me the virtual topology, virtual desktop service topology. The service topology map depicts what tiers are involved in supporting my service and how the data flows within my service. Walking this topology diagram left to right, you see the user connecting through a Citrix NetScaler device, a user logging into a web server, from there accessing a delivery controller. The delivery controller talks to VMware vCenter, provisions the desktop, and once the desktop is provisioned, the user can directly access that desktop. With EG Enterprise, you have agent or agentless monitoring of the different tiers of the infrastructure. For the purpose of this diagram, it doesn't matter whether we're monitoring metrics using agents or in an agentless manner. In fact, in reality, we could be using a combination of agent and agentless monitoring to pull together metrics required for this diagram. What you see from the color codes is that there are issues in a couple of places. User experience is obviously affected, but it looks like there is a more severe problem happening in the VMware tier. Now notice, to diagnose this problem further, I don't have to be a VDI expert. I can just follow the color cues and I know where to focus my attention on. In this case, I'm going to click on the VMware server so I can drill down and see what's going on. On a virtual server hosting tens or hundreds of desktops, I could be collecting thousands of metrics. To make it easy to analyze these metrics, EG Enterprise uses a layer model representation to depict the functioning of the server. What you see here is a layer model for a VMware server. A similar layer model exists for every other component of the virtual desktop environment. So we have models for provisioning server, delivery controller, NetScaler, and so on. Let's quickly walk through this model bottom up to see what's going on. The bottom layer is the hardware layer, which tells us the server hardware is doing fine. When you click on a layer, you see the types of test checks that are being run for that layer. You can see at the hardware level, we're looking at the fans, memory sensors, power, etc. The operating system of the VMware server is the hypervisor. Here we look at the data stores, memory usage, processors, etc. When you click on any of the checks that we run on the right-hand side, you see metrics that we're collecting in real time from each of the different tiers. In this case, we're pulling metrics from the VMware server using VMware APIs. Tick mark at the operating system level is telling us that the hypervisor is doing good. The service console is fine. There doesn't seem to be any issue. Network connectivity to the server looks good. The key processes that need to run for the VMware virtual machines to run are working well. Then we start to look at the virtual machines in detail. When I look at the virtual machines from the vCenter perspective or the VMware server's perspective, you can see the virtual machines that are on, you can see the users who are logged in, and for each of the virtual machines, you can actually see metrics on the right-hand side, like VMware's VM CPU ready time, which tell us how that particular virtual machine is doing. We call this the outside view of a virtual machine because this is what VMware sees. It doesn't know the word desktop operating system. It's not looking inside the desktop. It's basically looking at a VM and the physical resources that that virtual machine is consuming. To augment the outside view of a virtual machine, with EG Enterprise, you can get the inside view of a virtual desktop. The inside view is exactly how it sounds. We go into each and every virtual desktop using WMI in an agentless manner. we look at what is happening within the desktops. Looking at the VMware view, from the VMware server's perspective, in this case, the bottom 5 layers are telling us the hypervisor and the desktops are doing good. When I look inside a virtual desktop, I'm actually able to see that there are issues going on. Let me click on the inside view of the virtual desktops layer, and at this point, I get to see all of the desktops that are hosted on this specific ESX server. You can notice that we're monitoring desktops based on the username who's logged in. As I mentioned earlier, it's important to track user activity, not just virtual machine activity. You can see that while a couple of the desktops are seeing critical issues, user Alan's desktop is seeing a problem, so let me click on it to see what's going on. At this point, I'm drilling into user Alan's desktop to see what the EG Enterprise solution is seeing from within. Using Windows Management Instrumentation, WMI, we can look at various aspects of performance within the virtual desktop. How active is the disk? How much disk space is available? We can look at the HDX channels and look at the latencies that this user is seeing, the bandwidth that the user is consuming, etc. Now, if you look at the color codes, you can see that TCP traffic from the virtual machine is reporting an issue. Look at the metric that is reporting an error. That is retransmit ratio from the virtual machine. Currently, we are seeing about 25% retransmissions from the VM. Normally, 0 to 5% retransmissions are good for good TCP/IP performance. 5 to 10% will result in slowness. More than 20% retransmissions is an excessively high number. This means you're seeing almost 1 in 4 packets getting dropped. In such cases, you should expect to see extreme slowness, disconnects, screen freezes, and so on. So it is no wonder if you're seeing this level of retransmissions, it's no wonder that users are complaining. So what we've done with this few click-throughs is we've gone from a user visible problem, which was my desktop access was slow, to something that the IT folks can understand. If I call your system admin or a network admin and I say I'm seeing excessive retransmissions from the virtual machine, they know what to do to try to resolve the problem. If I call them and said my virtual desktop access is slow, they have no idea how to resolve the issue. So how this monitoring tool helps you is to go from a user visible problem to an actionable event at the operational level. In this example, the network team further investigated the problem and determined that the issue was being caused by a speed mismatch between the speed setting on the NIC card of the virtual desktop and the router interface with which it was connected. Now I showed you all these drill downs so you could see how EG Enterprise worked. In practice, you don't have to drill down several times to get to the cause of the problem. This small window that I brought up is our alarm window. This shows what are the open problems in the infrastructure. All the problems are color-coded, so you can see which are the most critical problems and where are the other informational alerts that the system is telling you. Notice the topmost alert, that's the highest priority problem. It's clearly indicating that TCP retransmission percentage is high for specific VMs. The other problems are actually tagged as minor priority, indicating that these are effects of the problem rather than being cause of the issue. The alert information that you see here can be sent to administrators over SMS, pager, as SNMP traps, or even trouble tickets can be opened automatically into your trouble ticketing system. Automatic root cause diagnosis like this can save you a lot of time and effort. In fact, to do this kind of diagnosis with a tool like this, even your help desk can do the basic troubleshooting that is required to get to the cause of the problem. Now, without proper root cause diagnosis in this example, we could have concluded that virtual desktop technology itself didn't work because users were experiencing performance problems. In this case, the real issue was not with the connection broker or the desktop protocol. It was really with the fact that the issue was in the network. This is an example of how EG Enterprise can help with your Citrix deployments. Now, the takeaway from this example is don't just monitor your environment as silos. Look at it as a service. Track the performance of every tier, correlate the performance across tiers, determine where your bottlenecks are. This is the role that the EG Enterprise Manager performs. I don't call EG Enterprise is not a server monitoring solution. It's not a network monitoring solution. It's essentially a service monitoring solution for your Citrix infrastructure. To use an analogy, consider what happens when you fall sick. You don't go directly to the specialist. You go first to the general practitioner. 80% of the time, the general practitioner will solve your problems. The other 20%, they can refer you to the right specialist. This is the same function that EG Enterprise performs for a Citrix environment. We're not advocating you need to get rid of all the tools that you use today. Most of these are specialized tools. Use a solution like EG Enterprise as a single pane of glass to get visibility into your Citrix environment. Now, far too often today, Citrix experts are being pulled into routine firefighting. Our Citrix performance survey showed that 2 out of 5 days in the week, that's 40% of the time, Citrix experts were being involved in firefighting. The example I showed you highlights how if you take a service-oriented view of your Citrix infrastructure, look end-to-end and correlate performance across the different tiers, it is possible to make diagnosis, take diagnosis to a level where even your help desk staff can effectively do first-level troubleshooting well and just call the right experts when the problem happens. This can save you a lot of time and effort. Now, the layer model diagram that I showed you is just one way of looking at the metrics collected within EG Enterprise. You can also, you might not just have operations people using the console. You might want to provide views for your architects, for your executives, and so on. So with EG Enterprise, you can build dashboards. Dashboards are completely customizable. You get to define the number of panels you want in a dashboard. You get to define the metrics that you want to see and how these metrics are presented. What you see here is an executive dashboard of your Zen desktop, of a typical Zen desktop environment. You see the demand, how many sessions are you getting across all the servers in your farm, what is the quality being delivered to your users, what is the overall health of the service, and then you can look at consumption of CPU, memory, network, IOPS, etc. And then you can get into your applications by popularity, by CPU, by memory, etc. Now moving on, we've spoken about how domain expertise was needed when you look at Citrix technologies, and I just want to highlight quickly a couple of instances where this comes in handy. We showed you an example of how EG Enterprise monitors virtual desktops. It also monitors Citrix XenApp in the same way. What you see on your screen is a model for a Citrix XenApp server. The topmost layer looks at users connecting to a Citrix XenApp server. You see currently the active users under Citrix users. One of the users, Charles, seems to be having an issue. On the right-hand side, you can see that the CPU time being used by Charles's session is almost 86%. One user taking such a high amount of CPU on a Citrix XenApp server is not common, so you might want to diagnose further and see what's going on. The magnifying glass next to a metric allows you to diagnose further and see why CPU time was high. And as you can see from this graphic, the diagnosis gives you an idea of what applications Charles is running within his session. Look at the first column, it gives you the process IDs. You see the names of the process. In this case, Charles seems to be running Internet Explorer multiple times. One of those processes is taking a high amount of CPU. And on the website, when you're accessing browser on a Citrix XenApp server, EG Enterprise is able to go deeper and actually tell you what URLs, what titles of web pages are you accessing. And from the information that you see here, you can see that Charles is watching a movie, potentially taking up CPU cycles on the server, impacting the performance being seen by other users of the system. Many a times we find organizations allow users on XenApp and XenDesktop to access non-corporate websites like Facebook and YouTube and so on. And many of these sites run scripts on the client side. Therefore, getting visibility into the URLs being accessed in a Citrix session is very critical. Give you another example of where Citrix expertise can help. In this case, we're looking at user John having a performance issue. If you look on the right-hand side, you'll see that the screen refresh latency for John's session is actually quite high. We spoke about latencies of 150 milliseconds being probably the max tolerable for a Citrix environment. You see here that John is seeing 8 seconds latency. Now the breakdown of latency with EG Enterprise, you can look at ICA network latency. How long is it taking to connect at the network level? And you can see that the network latency itself is about 7 seconds. So a high percentage of your overall HDX latency is due to the network. So this is a scenario where as a help desk person looking at these metrics, you can tell the user to change the network they're connecting from, because the problem is not on your Citrix server, but potentially on the network link that the user is connecting from. Let's talk a little bit about Citrix logons. Logons, as Ray mentioned, is a critical part of the user experience for a Citrix environment, whether it's XenApp or XenDesktop. Now, logon in today's Citrix infrastructure happens in multiple places. Some of the processing happens on the delivery controller, some of the processing happens on the XenApp server. So it is not possible to get complete visibility in one place. By monitoring the delivery controller and the XenApp server from one console, you can pull together insights into your logon process. In this graphic, we're looking at a delivery controller. You can see the user who's logged in last. You can see how long it took for them to log in. It took 331 seconds to log in. A very slow logon. You can see the breakdown of where time is being spent in the logon process. And in this case, you can see that the interactive session duration as classified by the Citrix delivery controller is what is the biggest component of the user logon process. Now you can get more details about the interactive session by looking at your XenApp server. You track the same user logging into the XenApp server, you look at their session startup details. You can see that the startup duration is broken down into its different subcomponents, and you can see group policy processing being the one that is taking most of your time. Again, diagnosis of group policy will give you details of what policies are being accessed, how much time is being used for processing each of these group policies. Clearly looking at this, you can see that drive mapping at the bottom is what is causing slow logons in this case. So my point here is your Citrix environment, user experience in a Citrix environment is critical. The more domain expertise your monitoring tool has with Citrix, the faster, easier it's going to be for you to diagnose the environment, diagnose problems in your environment. In summary, what EG Enterprise provides is unified monitoring of your Citrix environment. So you have visibility into your Citrix and non-Citrix tiers. The level of detail provided will allow you to troubleshoot even the trickiest of problems in minutes. Now, EG Enterprise provides unified monitoring of a Citrix environment using integration with Citrix Director and Insight. If you have Director running, if you have Insight running, you can feed metrics from these tools out of the box into the EG Enterprise console. It also has integration directly into consoles for ShareFile, XenMobile, XenServer, and so on. So what you get is a truly unified performance monitoring solution for your Citrix infrastructure. Now, up until now, we focused on real-time monitoring and diagnosis. This is one of the use cases for a monitoring solution. There may be other use cases that you can leverage on using the wealth of data that a monitoring tool collects. So for example, let us say you're migrating from Citrix XenApp 6.5 to 7.5. Did your performance improve or degrade after the move? Now, with the data collected from a monitoring tool, if you have performance data before the move, which is what you see on the left-hand side, you see performance data after the move on the right-hand side, you can actually use this data to determine the effect of your migration. Did you migrate correctly? Have you improved the user experience? What's changed? Migration reports that we've just shown are part of the EG reporting module. There are hundreds of pre-canned reports that are available in the reporting module. There are reports for executives, operations staff, and architects. And any of these reports you can save as PDF, export to your, email it to your colleague, or even schedule it so you can get the reports delivered into your inbox. Many industries, such as finance and healthcare, have very stringent auditing requirements. EG Enterprise collects information about who accessed your environment, when did they access it, what applications did they use, All of this is information that can be made available as part of a Citrix usage report. This is critical if you're required to provide data for auditing and compliance. Performance metrics can also help you understand where opportunities exist for capacity optimization. Almost every Citrix architect is looking for ways where you can accommodate more users per server. Metrics collected by performance monitoring are a great help here. In this graphic, you see performance of different servers in a VDI form. There are 6 different servers I'm looking at. Look at the number of sessions that are completed. Now, if the load were equally balanced, you should have seen the same number of sessions on all your servers. In this case, you see that the first 3 servers are showing an excessively large number of sessions compared to the other 3. So you're not optimally balancing the load across all your servers. You might want to check out what is going on, and if you fix the issue, that will actually help you accommodate more servers on the same infrastructure, more users on the same infrastructure. Very often, IT administrators throw hardware at performance issues. If you arbitrarily add CPU or memory to a server, you may not always be enhancing its capacity. Empirical data that the monitoring tool can provide can help you decide how you want to invest, whether you want to invest in additional hardware or not. In this example, we're looking at a virtual server cluster. Each of the bars in this graphic shows the VMs that are hosted on the server, whether they are in on or off state. And at the bottom, the on and off state are shown on both of these bars, and the brown bar on top gives you an idea of how many more VMs you can add based on CPU and based on memory. Looking at past history, looking at the empirical data, in this case, the report is telling us you can add 22 more VMs to this cluster based on CPU, whereas you can only add 3 more VMs based on memory. So clearly, this cluster is memory bottlenecked. Adding more CPU to this cluster will not help with scalability. Clearly, you need to invest in more memory for this cluster. So our 6th tip from a performance monitoring and management angle is don't just look at your monitoring tool for troubleshooting. Use it for analytics, optimization, and planning as well. Over to you, Ray.
Thank you very much. That was a wonderful overview, by the way. But here's the thing. The final question we want to consider in this webinar, and I said final, is when you should deploy performance monitoring. Very often I find customers out in the field do not think of performance monitoring up front when they deploy XenApp and XenDesktop. It's just the out-of-the-box experience. Instead, they deploy the solution, have it operational, and consider performance monitoring when they are seeing problems only. That's super reactive to me, and we're starting to go the other route, more proactive. Often it's too late. You don't have the empirical data that you can provide insight into where your bottlenecks are. And even if you were to find out where the bottlenecks are and how to fix them after the infrastructure is already deployed, fully may be difficult and it's very expensive, to tell you the truth. Hence, it's highly recommended that you consider performance monitoring and management up front when you deploy the Citrix infrastructure as a whole. Just keep that in mind from what we discussed earlier on the webinar. The Citrix is one of the most performance-sensitive services in the enterprise that I can attest to. The success and failure of your Citrix services is tied to the performance and critical that the performance monitoring be considered as early on as in the process as possible. So let's be proactive about it. If you have not thought about performance monitoring in the past, at least start to think about it before you upgrade to Citrix XenApp or XenDesktop 7.x or 7.8 that just came out. That brings us toward the 7th and final performance tip. Pretty much straightforward. Don't look at Citrix performance monitoring as an afterthought. From my overall experience with end-to-end performance monitoring solutions like the EG solution that Srinivas just perfectly demoed, I believe that you will see return on investment or ROI in the months, not days. With a proactive approach to the performance monitoring that you have in place, you can actually enhance your Citrix user experience, keep users happy is what I care about, and productive. You won't have to spend hours troubleshooting, So performance monitoring will reduce your IT support costs. That's a given. And with the optimizations that were suggested, you'll be able to save on hardware and software costs and also plan better for growth and the way ahead for your IT infrastructure.
Over to you, Christine.
All right, everyone. I want to thank you so much. I know we are definitely short on time, but I wanted to thank you, Ray and Srinivas, for sure, for your insights and advice. Very much appreciated. And for more information on EG Innovations, our products, solutions, technology, etc., certainly go to our website, www.eginnovations.com. To get a free trial, you can access our free trial. It's on pretty much every page. You can also send us an email at info@eginnovations.com, or you can give us a call at the number you see on the slide here. But before we end, I did want to try to dig into just a few questions before we end this call, and so let's try to dig into that. And there's a few questions that have come in, so let's look at that. And we've got one, I believe, here for Ray. It's about the Citrix Workspace Cloud. And then, Ray, the question is, how are you seeing adoption of the Citrix Workspace Cloud? Are there any use cases where you see this kind of bubbling up in terms of adoption?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And yeah, Workspace Cloud is becoming a lot more prevalent out there with regard to mid-level enterprise. So I'd say about 1,500 users or below. But this is the misnomer here. Workspace Cloud is a hybrid cloud approach. A lot of people are considering public cloud, but a lot of people still want to retain their data. So what CWC does is it takes the console and SQL and everything that's the front end for a Citrix environment and puts it in Citrix's cloud on the back end. So theoretically, you could burst out to other VDAs or virtual desktop agents out beyond that to another cloud location, Azure, AWS, Cloud Platform, or your internal data center through what they call a Workspace Cloud Connector. The use case that I see with this is where people have data that they want to keep residing in their data center, but they don't want to have to manage the console or the SQL database outside of, just building out a couple of desktops and deploying it internally. So that's where I see that adoption happening more so now. It's more of a hybrid cloud approach. And I'm definitely using that towards an EG monitoring solution because there's definitely network latency and things that need to be considered between the cloud portion and the on-prem data center portion. Good question.
All right, awesome. And here is another question is that I guess we did not address in this presentation, workspace personalization and management. Do you have any recommendations, Ray, in this area?
Yeah, I mean, if we're going to deploy a Citrix environment, they come out of the box with a Citrix Profile Manager that can help manage the basic portions of the user experience. But I could definitely recommend some, other UEMs is what I call our user environment management tools. That would be another what I call layer on top of your entire infrastructure because everything we build out is in the referencing towards layers. So EG is a layer. EG is in the operations layer. That's an important layer to consider. Regarding workspace personalization and management, I actually see tools such as Res Software or AppSense as tools that you could leverage, or Liquidware Labs, several tools that you could leverage for UEM, actually monitoring the workspace and being able to do everything from one single image and giving them exactly what personalization needs that they have at that moment.
Awesome. And then we also, just to try to fit in a few questions specifically to the demo that everyone just saw about EG Enterprise specifically, Srinivas, is EG Enterprise a product or a service, and how is it licensed?
So EG Enterprise is a product you can install on-prem. We also have an offering where you can host it in the cloud and offer it as a SaaS service to your customers if you're a Citrix service provider. We also offer EG Enterprise on tap as a SaaS-based service if you want to just install agents in your structure and start monitoring it. So all three options are available with the solution. From a licensing standpoint, it's pretty straightforward. We use both agent and agentless monitoring as required. The licenses are the same whether you go agent or agentless. You need a license for each of the core components of your Citrix infrastructure. So you need a license for your delivery controller, for your hypervisor, storage, etc. You also, with respect to XenApp and virtual desktops, Zen desktops, we can license it either based on the number of servers that you're using, or it can be licensed based on named users or concurrent users. So we have quite a bit of flexibility there. If you're an enterprise that's getting where you've deployed applications that can be used only by a few users per server, then you can go with a user-based licensing model. If you're getting hundreds of users on a server right now, you can go with a server-based licensing model, which will be more cost-effective. So we give customers both options.
Great, and then here's kind of a combo question in terms of setup. What kind of hardware and software does it take to get started, and about how long does it take to get set up? And in addition to that, what is the learning curve once it's set up for users using our technology?
Okay. So from an infrastructure required standpoint, you just need to install the EG Management Console on a virtual machine. 4 to 8 gig of RAM. We need access to a backend database, which can be Oracle or SQL. This is the hardware and software requirements if you were installing the EG Management Console management server in-house. If you're going to use the cloud, obviously you don't have to set up the management server in-house. You just install agents on your servers, and those agents are pointed to our console we have running in the cloud. Installation of the management server takes less than 30 minutes. Installation of the agents is automated, less than a minute. To get it up and running on a server, you don't need to do a reboot. So setup of the software is pretty straightforward. With respect to fine-tuning, we need access to your credentials. For example, if we want to monitor your VMware environment, we need access to connect to your vCenter to pull metrics about your VMware servers. So there is some configuration involved in giving the monitoring tool the access required to pull together metrics from the different tiers. In terms of the learning curve, I'd say the learning curve is very short for 2 reasons. 100% browser-based UI, so very simple to use, connect from anywhere. The usage model with the layers and the topology diagram is very simple, so you can get up and running within a few hours, certainly become an expert in a few days in terms of using the solution. I would also hasten to add that most of the best practices that I discussed are available out of the box in the tool. We have models for XenApp, Zen Desktop, provisioning server, license server, etc. pre-built. So you don't have to sit and configure rules or thresholds and baselines. The software comes pre-programmed with best practices. You can fine-tune these settings if you want to. So from in terms of how quickly you can be up and running, within a couple of days you can actually have 50 to 100 server environment up and running, fully functional, monitored.
Awesome. And in the essence of time, I'm going to try to fit one more in, so I'm going to try to combine a couple more questions so we can get the most out of this. And that would be, is there a minimum size Citrix environment for which EG Enterprise is more applicable? And then in addition to that, can you give us an idea of the scale of our deployments today? What are some of our larger installations in terms of user servers, etc.?
So there isn't a minimum sized infrastructure. I think performance is important even if you had 20 servers connecting in and they were your CEO and CIO. I think performance becomes critical. Just the other day we were working with a customer who had a critical problem on one server, and we were able to diagnose the problem and show them exactly where the bottlenecks are. So from a deployment size perspective, it doesn't matter what the size of your environment is. The criticality matters the most. If your Citrix infrastructure is critical and performance is critical to you, then a solution like this will help. From a licensing angle, our solution is scalable. You don't have to, the cost of the solution isn't, you don't have to put in a big upfront cost to get the solution deployed if you just want to monitor a few servers. Therefore, it's applicable for a smaller environment as it is for a bigger environment. Christine, sorry, I missed the second part of the question.
The second second part of the question was, in terms of a larger scale, what are some of our larger deployments? How many users and servers in one of our larger installations are we looking at today?
So with years of experience working with Citrix, we work with some of the largest Citrix installations. We've got customers running 50,000 concurrent users and above. So we can scale as low as one server. We can scale as high as thousands of servers with tens of thousands of users.
Okay, great. I think that's awesome. There's a few other questions, but I think we are definitely over on time, and I appreciate everybody staying on the line to hear some of these questions and answers, and certainly appreciate everyone's time today joining us, and appreciate Srinivas and Ray and all their great insight. And again, you will be receiving a recording as well as all the slides, hopefully by Friday, if not by the latest on Monday. And everything will be available, well, the slides will be available on SlideShare as soon as we're done here, and the recording of the webinar will also be on our website by tomorrow. So you guys will have everything you need. We appreciate your time today and hope you found this very helpful. And as soon as I end the webinar, we will have a short survey just asking you to rank how helpful this information was to you from 1 to 5, 5 being the best. So if you could participate in that, that would be greatly appreciated as well. And again, thanks everyone for everyone's time, and have a great day.
Thank you, everybody.